Thank you for your company here on Richo Jones. Now, Alan Jones always prides himself on all this preparation. He just does it all no notes ever, thousands of pages. He has minions everywhere preparing them for him. But I don't think we need too many tonight because this next interview is going to be very special. I'll leave it to you.
Okay, thank you, because this is something a little different, of which neither of us was aware. There's a Senate inquiry by the Senate Economics Reference Committee into personal choice and community impacts. And this is going to report by the 13th of June next year, and the committee accepted submissions until last Friday, 18th of September. Now, the terms of reference, this is fascinating, include consideration of things like bicycle helmet laws, the sale and service of alcohol, the sale and use of marijuana and associated products, the sale and use of tobacco. You know the situation with the small businessman. He's got to close all his shelves and can't let anyone know he's selling tobacco. E-cigarettes, the classification of publications, films and computer games, and any other measures introduced to restrict personal choice. Now, David Leyonhjelm has launched this parliamentary inquiry. I think this is well worth considering. He's talking about the burgeoning nanny state, declaring war on laws and regulations that prevent Australians having fun at their own risk. Now, the Senate inquiry, interestingly, was unopposed by other senators. It'll examine any law that restricts personal choice, quote, for the individual's own good, including the sale and use of alcohol, tobacco and even pornography. Now, this Senate Economics Reference Committee inquiry is to be chaired by him. He's the Liberal Democrat senator from New South Wales, and it will test the claims of public health experts, for example, about bicycle helmets. I mean, you go to other countries in the world, there's no such thing. But here, we're just dominated by rules. Now, Senator Leyonhjelm is a staunch defender of what he calls the right to make bad choices. And he wants the inquiry to focus on the rise of nanny state laws. Now, it's hard to argue with that, even though Malcolm Turnbull's got 41 people in the ministry and government gets bigger and bigger. Senator Leyonhjelm said the inquiry would not focus on firearms or drugs of addiction, such as ice and heroin, because those laws were designed to suppress crime and protect innocent people. Well, of course, everyone's going to start jumping up and down over all of this, but we thought we'd talk to the man himself, and he's here with us in the studio.
He is indeed.
Yeah. See, to just illustrate one point, I have always said I don't understand why we've got a law when you're riding a bicycle which says you must have both hands on the handlebars. And everyone thinks, oh, isn't that sensible? The other law then says when you're turning right, you must indicate with your right arm. So one law forces the breaking of another. That's what you're on about, isn't it?
Well, more generally, what I'm talking about is the feeling that the government knows better than some people, and therefore it can tell some people, and they never exactly nominate who those people might be. But there's always a feeling that there is this feeling that some people don't know what's best for them, and that the government is public servants and politicians like me, and not other politicians who aren't like me, think that they have good ideas, and that not only are those ideas so good they'd like to advise people that they should take notice of them, but they should force them to do it. And that's the difference between a sort of a free country, if you like, and a nanny state country.
Your words, it's not the government's business unless you're likely to harm another person.
Yes.
Harming yourself is your business. It's not the government's business.
That's right. It's the liberal principle that John Stuart Mill introduced, the harm principle, that the only purpose of a government is to prevent harm to other people, and over your own self, he said, you're sovereign. So, yes, you should be capable of making bad choices, doing unwise things, and unless you're mentally incompetent, and we include children, so there's the concept in law is well understood. If you are mentally disabled, a child, then other people can make a decision for you. But if you're an adult and you're not mentally incompetent, then you should make choices of your own.
What about addictions? Because when you're addicted, you don't really have a choice. You must do something. So if you're talking about, I think, because alcohol, and you mentioned alcohol earlier on, gambling's another one. There's now an inquiry, they're going to restrict gambling. Should they do so?
Not for adults, in my opinion, and not unless somebody is sort of legally incapable of managing their own life. So there are a few people who fall into that category. But gambling for the vast majority of people is a recreation which they enjoy. There are a few people who go too far, as with drinking, as with smoking, all those sorts of things. Some people go too far, very unwise. We all know it's unwise. We're not sort of defending their bad decision. The question is whether the government should impose rules intended to stop people making unwise choices. That's at the core of the issue. Now, my argument is nobody can make a better decision about your life than you can yourself. I have not met anyone in Canberra, in the bureaucracy or in Parliament House, who is so smart that they're capable of making a better decision for another adult than that person themselves.
Yeah, it's a very good point. See, about bicycle helmets. Now, we've been all around the world. You never see people, you go to Greece, they roar up the street in their motorbike. In your words, bicycle helmets are not a threat to other people if you don't wear a helmet. You're not going to bang your bare head into someone else. But we're tied up with all of this, aren't we?
We are. In fact, Australia and I think New Zealand are the only two countries in the world where adults are obliged to wear bicycle helmets. You know, I think wearing a bicycle helmet at times is a good idea.
You're a bike rider.
Yeah, I ride a bicycle and a motorbike. I wear a helmet both times, depending on the circumstances.
That's it's the law here.
It is the law.
If it was your choice, would you wear it?
I definitely would on the motorbike,
yeah.
yes. The bicycle, I probably wouldn't. If I was racing, I'm too old to worry about all that, but if I was in racing, I probably would wear it.
Yeah.
If I had kids who were riding a bike, I'd put a helmet on them because little heads are more vulnerable.
Sure.
But if you go to the Netherlands, for example, there are millions of people riding around on bicycles all around the place, everywhere. The only people you see wearing helmets are road racers and children.
Yeah, see, I think this is worth debate. You see, you just take, I mean, you talk about tobacco. Now, tobacco's a legal product. And yet storekeepers, the cost to the storekeeper of keeping that product is enormous.
Yeah.
All this business that goes on the outside of cigarette packets, and it hasn't made any difference at all. What do you say about tobacco?
Well, it's gone from beyond the stage of protecting other people from secondary smoke. There is evidence, scientific evidence, that secondary smoke can cause harm to other people. So it's legitimate to say, well, you know, the government's got a role in preventing that. So smoking in a confined space, the government has a role. Now, I would argue from the property rights point of view that if a restaurant owner or a bar owner was to put a big sign up on the door saying smoking is allowed in here, so in other words, you're not an unwary person.
You know what you're going into.
You know what you're getting into. I don't think it's the government's business to ban smoking in places under those circumstances anyway. But nevertheless, you can argue from the harm principle, the John Stuart Mill principle, that preventing harm to others from secondary smoke, there is a role for the government in that. But it's gone way beyond that. We're into disapproval territory now. People don't like smoking. They disapprove of it, and therefore they use that to justify increasing constraints on smokers. So as a result, you see prohibitions on them smoking outdoors in certain areas within 10 metres of various places, not because the smoke is harmful, but because they disapprove of it or they might just catch a whiff of it. You can't smoke on some beaches, for example. You can't smoke at bus shelters. There's lots and lots of places where you can't smoke. And then you have the plain packaging legislation, which all the figures suggest has had no impact actually on smoking. And it's cost the cigarette companies, like them or not, it's cost the cigarette companies millions, hundreds of millions probably in intellectual property losses because they had brands in those things. For what purpose? It's based on disapproval. It's not based on a recognition that it's a legal product. You might not like it, you might not want to do it yourself, but you invoke the power of the government, the coercive power of the government, in order to impose your view.
It's a very important debate. I mean, what about marijuana?
Marijuana is now legal in 3 states of America for recreational purposes. The sky has not fallen. The state has not become a dissolute bunch of druggies. Those who are smoking it illegally now smoke it legally. And not only that, but the state governments in those states are collecting tax revenue on it. There is no justification for a prohibition on marijuana. Yes, it's not always good. there are some people who are negatively affected by marijuana, but again, it's not a third person who's harmed. It's just that individual who chooses to smoke it.
And then, of course, Graham's got a swimming pool in his backyard because he lives in, opulent eastern suburbs. But nonetheless, the cost of the pool is significant.
Yes.
But he can't stick his pool there without putting a pool fence. You've made comments about pool fences.
We may or may not address pool fences. It's a bugbear of mine. I have a swimming pool too, with it, and I have to have a fence.
You must be doing well, eh?
We all do.
Yeah.
Senators are well paid, John. Senators are very well paid. I used to be one.
Not as well paid as famous radio personalities, but
that was a broad.
You got him there. Well done.
Back to the pool fence.
Righto. But we don't have children. We have front fence, front gate, side gate, all that sort of stuff, and yet we still have to have a pool fence around the pool. For any child to get in and be at risk in my backyard, they would have to be very, very good at climbing over very high fences, and then they get into the backyard. There's another pool fence which isn't even as high. I think it's a dreadful imposition. Another one that you might like to think about is cracker night. You can do harm with crackers, of course, but the vast majority of people who were ever injured by cracker night were themselves being silly about it. I have lost count of the number of people who've written to me saying, could you please look at the cracker, the ban on fireworks.
I remember as a child,
Yes.
in the street there was a big barbecue. You'd have a huge fire, and everybody in the street would come and we'd let off crackers.
Now government says it can't be done. See, I was having a look at some figures the other day. Commonwealth and state parliaments in 2003, Commonwealth and state, added 33,000 pages of new laws. Now, come on.
Yeah, no, it's over the top. We are seriously over-governed. A lot of people say, well, we should get rid of state governments and eliminate one of the levels of government. I don't think that would help one bit. We just get the Commonwealth government making up for it with even more laws. The fact is that all three levels of government are doing too much, trying to do too much. We have a culture now, which we didn't used to have, where whenever a problem emerges, there is an expectation that the government will do something. Yeah, do something. Then the newspapers will scream, do something. And instead of saying, well, is there a sort of a civil society answer? Can people help people to overcome the problem? Is there an answer from the churches or social groups or some of the clubs like Apex and Rotary and so forth who do good work? Does it always have to be the government? Do we always need a new law? The answer is often, no, we don't.
And there's no point in having a law if you don't police it. I mean, there's a law in New South Wales which limits, can you believe it, the number and type of pets you can keep, even down to the budgies in your cage and the goldfish in your pond.
Yes.
Dogs are acceptable as long as they're licensed, but they have to be fitted with a microchip where you get fined. Your dog can only bark within prescribed hours or you'll be fined $1,000. Dogs are banned from most beaches, but even on beaches where they're allowed, it's an offence to chase a seagull.
I have my own personal bugbear. You're not allowed to park your car across your own driveway.
Yes, that's another one.
That's illegal.
Yeah, that's another one.
And that really always annoyed me. When I lived at Paddington for 10 years, you needed to. You needed to park because there was no parking. They wouldn't let you. I actually got booked twice.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And of course, it gives the police huge discretion. If they don't like you, they'll book you. If they like you, they'll let you off. Giving the police too much discretion is always risky. There's also, the point you make is very, very valid. Everybody has at least one nanny state issue that really irritates them. Everybody has one. What I'm trying to do with this inquiry, just to sort of complete the discussion, is realise that it's not just that issue that's the problem. It is a sort of a cultural thing. This attitude that the government's got to do something, and just because you disapprove of something, just because you wouldn't do it, just because you don't like it, does not entitle you to call on the government and say, impose my view, make it the law.
But who decides this? I mean, fishing. You can catch a flathead, but it can't be bigger than 32 centimetres. So you've got to take your ruler with you and get all this sort of done. And I saw that the OECD said that the compliance cost of regulation for small and medium-sized businesses, and that's meaning all this nonsense you're talking about, putting signs up here and signs up there, in Australia in 1998 was more than 17 billion.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's a different issue, but over-regulation of business is one of the core issues. If you compare Australia with, say, Singapore or Hong Kong, they are hugely prosperous. They don't have massive agricultural industries. They don't have massive mining industries, and yet they enjoy faster growth rates. Singapore now has a higher GDP per population than Australia does. Their people are well paid, healthy, happy, well educated, and their tax rate is half of ours. Now, why is that? It can't be. You can't tax your way to prosperity. We are overtaxed and over-regulated, and we need to turn it around.
Thomas Jefferson said in 1801 in his inaugural address, and it's your point, if man can't be trusted with the government of himself, how can he be trusted with the government of others?
That's a very good point. Chris Berg from the Institute of Public Affairs has recently done a book where he makes exactly that point. He says, we don't let people make decisions about their simple things in life, like wearing a helmet. How can we then trust them to go and vote and to choose the government? Now, you see where this is heading. It's an argument against democracy. You say, well, no, you can't. There will be people who will say, no, you can't trust people to vote. There's too many stupid people out there. I've had arguments with people who say, oh, look, you can't leave some of these decisions to people. There are people out there who
just believe that.
Yeah,
so that same Chris Berg, who is a senior fellow at the Institute of Public Affairs, said of Senator Leyonhjelm, this is an important inquiry because it's important to understand the relationship between the citizen and the state.
Yes.
What Senator Leyonhjelm's doing is to clarify that relationship.
Indeed, and we are grateful
Nanny
for it. But we will have to leave it there. Thanks for your time, David.
Good to talk to you, David.
We'll be back in just a moment on Richo and Jones.
This is Richo.